everyone, Adam here, So Was Your Podcast. I got to sit down with Jessica Graham, who was one of the lead actresses and also had a hand in making the sci-fi movie The Tangle. If you watched the other interview I did with Christopher Soren Kelly on The Tangle, he was the director who made the movie. We get even more insight to this awesome sci-fi movie since she has worked with Christopher a lot in the past, and they have personal relationship that we don't go deep into it. Obviously, it's not what the thing's about, but just the closeness of the two shows on the screen, so it's worth mentioning. As I said in the intro to the last one, if you haven't seen that interview, definitely check it out because The Tangle was a very, very cool movie. It is available now. Enjoy my conversation with Jessica Graham. Hey everyone, Adam here, So Wizard Podcast. I'm sitting down with Jessica Graham to talk about her new movie, The Tangle. How you doing, Jessica?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me, Adam.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it. I did have a chance to watch the movie, so I'm excited to get into it.
Oh, fantastic.
Before we get there, though, I always like to ask creative people, what was your creative spark? Going way back to the beginning of your journey.
Yeah, well, I was always a little performer and also liked to be in charge. So I would sort of write, direct, and star in all of all of these shows when I was really little. And I did ballet, and I really loved kind of being on stage. And it was actually I played Antigone when I was about 11. I only went to school for a few years of my life, and I went to this like private sort of hippie school, and like a school where you sing Beatles songs in a dome every morning, kind of thing. Like it was very unique, and
Okay.
they had me play Antigone, and I loved the experience so much, and I got really good feedback from adults, which I think at that time felt really important to little me. And so I stuck with it. I just wanted to keep going from there, and started. I think I lied about my age to get into a teen acting class when I was like 11 or 12 or something, because I just wanted to I just really wanted to do it. So it came on pretty young.
Okay, so you kind of always have been performing.
Yeah, and I mean, I think in some ways it's just sort of a natural expression of me. Like that's just part of how I put myself out in the world. But I think also it had something to do when I was younger. It had definitely some of the spark and the inspiration was about wanting attention and wanting to be special. And as I got older and started kind of dealing with some of the underlying things that were involved in that, I actually took a big step back from acting because I didn't feel like I needed it anymore. I didn't feel like I needed to get applause to feel good enough. And I'm not saying like this was me uniquely. I'm not saying that other performers necessarily have this specific thing, but
Hmm.
as I sort of grew and changed as a person, it became less important to me, and I sort of disconnected from it. And then I reconnected just based purely on the sort of joy of storytelling and the way in which storytelling has been with us since forever, and it's a really important way to connect with other humans. And then I came back to it, so it's been kind of a journey.
Yeah, that is interesting. In the time you kind of took a step back from acting, were you still producing or writing, or I imagine you didn't step away from the creative arts altogether?
Well, I never fully stepped away, and there was always a little something here or a little something there that I was up to. But in some ways, yeah, I did kind of fully step away, and not like completely, but I got very into meditation, and I got very into kind of consciousness exploring, and started just devoting a lot of time to that. And it wasn't actually until got meet Chris and I met and got together that it became very clear that I needed to get back to that part of my life, because he was very much in that part of his life. He was very much doing a lot of acting and wanted to make films. And I was like, oh, yeah, I can feel that longing to get back into it. And so we started making short films together. And that kind of got me more focused on that part of my life.
That's interesting, and I don't mean for this to be too intrusive, so if I'm crossing a line, just let me know.
No, as you said, I think you might be able to tell I'm an open book.
Okay, I just like to be safe. When you took all that time out to, look more internally, because it's kind of a meditation and thing, calming your brain. Um, did you find that it had a lot of big changes when you did get back to acting and creating?
It's a beautiful question, and yes, absolutely. I remember, I hadn't been on set for probably a couple years, and, maybe a little something here or there, but and I had during that time been doing a lot of, as you said, like, sort of introspection, and I got on set, and it was just a tiny little role in, like, a fun short film, and suddenly I was like, "Oh, this is listening. This is what it's like to really connect with another actor. Oh, this is what it's like to be present and in the moment," which are, all things you hear in, acting class, to be present, to listen, to really connect. And I don't think I wasn't connecting or listening at all, but it was just a completely different level, after that, kind of doing that journey inward. The other thing that became possible for me through that inward journey was that I was more open to learning because I didn't really go to school. There was kind of a resistance or a fear or even like a feeling of being repelled from education, which is weird to say now because I love learning. But I felt like if I went and did like real training, that then they would realize that I was a fraud. Like that way, I think that was what was in the background. And so through doing the spiritual and the psychological work, I got to a place where it's like, oh, I actually want to hone this craft. I actually want to be better at this. I actually want help and support. And so I ended up doing Meisner training, and I did some Meisner training with a studio called Elizabeth Mesnick Acting Studio. But then I did 3 years, and then a bunch of additional work with Joshua Baton, who is the lead in the Tangle. He ended up becoming my acting coach. I did some really intensive training there and became a much better actor as a result, for sure.
Oh, that's awesome. Just a quick aside, what exactly is Meisner training?
So Meisner comes from Stanford Meisner, and Sanford Meisner, and it's in some ways, there's method acting where like
Mhm.
you create, like, you actually live out the experience. With Meisner, it's about creating imaginary circumstances that you can then live through. And so you don't need to go and like become go live on the street for a while and shoot up heroin in order to play a homeless heroin addict. You can actually come up with either experiences that are similar to that can create that kind of experience in you, or like really paint out and use your imagination to create, well, what would that be like? And so you're trained to be able to really tap into your imagination and also really tap into doing. So acting is doing is the philosophy here. So if you're like, for example, if I'm watching a movie and someone's like folding laundry or chopping up vegetables, and I can tell they're not really folding laundry or chopping up vegetables, you know what I mean? I'm like, hey, you're not really doing it. So that's sort of like, that's how it starts. It starts by like really actually truly connecting to what you're doing, and then you start layering in emotion on top of that. There's a lot more to it, but it's a really beautiful acting training. And um I think really good, especially for people that are new. It's good for people that aren't new because it was great for me, but people that are new that need like a toolkit of how to how to really um, how to really listen, but also how to really live through the experiences that we need to live through as actors. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and it sounds like it would go hand in hand with somebody like yourself who is so into meditation and looking inward, and, figuring things out that way.
Totally, yeah, it, like, completely matched up with what I was already interested in, so yeah, for sure.
Yeah, all right. So when you got back into acting, was there any difference in the kind of projects you were trying to seek out?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, yes, in some ways that sort of happened slowly, um, but that definitely did happen, like, when I was younger, like, I would just do anything, "Oh, you want me to act? Okay, I'll do it," I didn't really care about any underlying message in the film, or it's not that I didn't care at all. It's not that I didn't care at all, because I do remember this one film that I was cast in, when I first moved to LA, and there was some sexual violence in the film, and I remember when they cast me, having before saying yes, having a conversation, like, really wanting to get clear on why that was in the film, and how it was going to be shot, and just I just wanted, so it's not like I wasn't at all conscious, but I became much more conscious about the type of content and how the story was being told, and even who is telling the story. I mean, I guess I see, for me, and I don't put this on anyone else, but for me as an artist, as a filmmaker, as an actor, I feel like I have a responsibility around the stories I tell and how I tell them, because our culture is formed through storytelling in many ways. And so it's not that I wouldn't do like a fun horror movie. I would if it was the right project, but there would be specific particular kind of criteria that I would kind of want to go through to be sure that it was something that I'd want to be involved in. And I do find myself more drawn to projects that really speak to me, like mind, heart, body, spirit. Also because there's only so many hours in the day, and I've other things I'm passionate about along with acting. And so I want to really love what I'm working on and love the people I'm working with. And, and that's why, I'm definitely not a movie star. I do like little independent films with people, that I really like. And so, it's a different kind of acting career, but so far I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, I mean, I'm an outsider looking in, of course, but it just seems like such a cutthroat kind of industry. And that when you're especially first starting to get a role is like, what's the role? It's a role. Okay, I'll take the role, because
Yeah.
it's good you
Yeah.
were able to be a little bit more, I don't want to say picky, but, decisive or
Yeah.
discerning, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the first time the first time I said no to something that was like a legitimate role that paid well, that like, but it didn't align for me, like that was kind of a turning point. And it was challenging because there was definitely a part of me that was like, but I just want to be in the movie and I just want to act and this is what I love to do. But then there was this other part of me that was like, not this isn't the one, this isn't the way. And sort of took a lot of processing, but ultimately it was the right decision, and it felt good to feel like I was kind of aligning my values with what I was putting out in the world.
Yeah, that's an interesting part of the actor's journey that we don't get to hear a lot about is the roles they turn down. I mean, unless there's like some insane like, of course you turned it down because that guy was a monster or whatever it was. It's interesting to think that like it's just not the right fit. I had to walk away, and you think about the experience, the resume, the next job, the paycheck, even, and it's just like it's interesting. I guess I'm not saying anything you don't know. I'm just kind of processing it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I find it really interesting to talk about. And and I think it's also important to say that, like, there's a certain amount of privilege in being able to say no, and I'm by no means like, rolling in the dough, but for another person, that may not be an option to say no to a paying job,
Mhm.
and so I just think that's important to acknowledge as well, that like, there's I was in a position to be able to say no, which, is
Yeah.
is worth noting.
Yeah, it's good and probably good for your longevity in the career in the profession.
Yeah, yeah.
So you mentioned that when you got back into acting and everything, it wasn't too long before you met up with Chris, who, for people listening who didn't hear that interview, because I talked to Chris yesterday, directed the movie. So you've
Yeah,
been working with him for a while.
yeah, so Chris and I don't know if he mentioned this in his interview, but we're partners in life and work, so we are a couple, and, we met on set, actually. So,
Okay.
that was a actually, here's the thing, I didn't think of it this way. So, I was in this space where I was like, I wanna do some acting, and I haven't done any in a while, and back then, you could find acting jobs on Craigslist, like legitimate acting jobs. And it was sort of the tail end of that period, but you still could. And I went and I started scrolling through Craigslist trying to find, an audition. And I found this audition, and it was like, I think it was just for a teaser of a film. They were casting the film, but they were just going to shoot the teaser, and they weren't going to pay. And there was, like, nothing about that was appealing to me, but there was for some reason, I was like, "I gotta go. I gotta go to this audition." And I, like, really went all out. Like, I was like, "I'm gonna get this role." For whatever reason, like, I just had, like, just I was, like, on a mission, and I did. And then there's a chemistry test or a screen test with the person who's going to play opposite with me, and it's Chris. And I'm like, hmm, I just had this weird sort of familiar experience where I kind of like, I didn't know him, but I was like, I kind of know him. And then he ended up being cast, and we shot this trailer together. And there were some complications. We couldn't just dive right in. Like there were some things, other people involved and things to kind of sort out. But ultimately, within a couple months, we did get together, and we started. I think we made our first film together. It was Chessor, which is available online, and that was the short. And that we made. I think we made that in like 2012. So it was about a year, year and a half, 2 years after we got together that we made that. And then yeah, then we went on to make Monkeys, and then ultimately the Tangle, because we're putting all this work into shorts, we should make a feature. And the shorts did well, and it sort of attracted people who wanted to support us making the Tangle. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The teaser that you guys met on, did that ever go anywhere?
Eh, I mean, we saw it. We saw the teaser, and then they made like a little mini, like I guess they called it a feature. Did they call it a featurette? I don't remember what they called it, but they never ended up making the film.
Oh, okay.
It was actually kind of a cool role for me too. I would have liked that, but no, it never ended up happening. And it's like I think we were just supposed to meet, so
Yeah,
that's
so I guess it worked out either way.
yeah.
All right. So you're not just an actor, you also write, and I don't mean just an actor, but you also write and produce and kind of work behind the camera too. Was that always part of your interest as well?
So I do write, but I don't write scripts, at least not yet. I write. I have a book called "Good Sex: Getting Off Without Checking Out," and it's about combining your spiritual practice and mindfulness with your sex life. So I am an author, but I'm not a screenplay writer yet. Um, Producing is something that I sort of had a naturally was drawn to that because I was kind of bossy and I was like very, very perfectionist in like every detail. And so I started producing theater when I was 18 and in Philadelphia. And I ran several theater companies for about 7 years.
Wow.
So I was acting and I was producing and I was like running these companies. And that was a real education in of itself. Like I said, I didn't go to school, but I had this like hands-on education. So when I came out to LA, I really wanted to just focus on acting, but but then Chris wanted to make Chessor. There wasn't a role for me, but I still wanted to help make it, so I ended up helping produce, and that sort of drew me back into producing. And I realized, like, you know what, like this doesn't really suit me so much anymore. Like I'm not so much of a perfectionist anymore. I'm not quite so bossy anymore. And so I have done some producing, but when I started getting like people reaching out being like, will you produce my film? I was like, no. Like I produced these films because I was supporting Chris with Tressor. I was in Monkeys and I was in the Tangle, and I, wanted to make the films. So I would say like I'm just not a producer anymore. It's not the hat that I wear anymore, but I have become a director. So I've directed 3 projects now.
Oh,
Um,
awesome.
yeah, and that really suits me. I guess there's still some bossiness in me. There's still, I'm a leader still. But I have a short film called Listen, which was written and also co-produced with Clark D. Schaefer, who was the executive producer on The Tangle. And then another short film called Into Light, which was about Inez Milholland, who was a suffragist who died for the cause just before the women got the right to vote. And then there was a pilot called Group Ease, which was part of the YouTube Women's Comedy Initiative. So I've that's been over the last several years. I've started to do a bit more of that, and I really love it. It's a lot of work, but I really love it. Maybe even as much as acting.
You love it as much as acting, or is it too much work, or
I,
both?
I think I love it as much.
Yeah.
It's different. It's like a different, it's like I'm
Yeah.
polyamorous with it. Like it's like I love them both, but differently.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But it is hard. Like I mean, it's like I remember being on set for these shorts that I directed and being like, oh, I'm so glad I'm not acting. Like I'm so like because it's hard work, and there's this part of me that's like, it's nice to just like sit back here with my baseball cap on and no makeup and just like, run the show. But then like all everything that comes afterwards, all of the post and all of the whole process, it's a lot. It's worth it, but it's a lot.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot. I mean, when you said that you produced theater from 18 on, it's like, man, at 18, I was like trying to save up for a car or something. Like that's a lot of responsibility.
Well, to be fair, I mean, I was on my own at like 14, so I had an early start. I had like 4 extra years before most people are adults. So yeah.
Still, kudos to you.
Thanks.
The projects you directed sound like they're all very different. Do you just come across something that piques your interest and you jump on it?
So there's actually a thread that connects them all. So Listen is about the horrors and heartbreak of domestic violence, and it's a pretty challenging watch actually. But it's an important watch, and that's actually still going in festivals, even though it's available online as well. It'll be um, doing a festival later next month. So that project came to me through Clark, who again worked on the Tangle, and he came to me asking me to play the role of the woman in the film. And as we started talking it out, he was like, he knew I wanted to direct. I had never directed, and he knew I wanted to. And we started to talk it out, and he's like, you know what? I think you should direct it because maybe this film should be directed by a woman. And I was like, I think you're right. And so he gave me the project, which was
Wow,
really,
yeah.
yeah, really generous. And so that was the first one. Now, when I was casting that, I needed to find some really amazing actors for that film, and I came across Amy Walker in an acting class, and I didn't realize that Amy Walker's actually got this huge YouTube following. I knew her, I was a fan of her, but I didn't realize when I saw her in the acting class who she was. And I was like, I think you're the person for my film. Would you consider playing this role? And she said yes. So, and she was amazing. And then playing opposite her was Trey McCurley, who's really great. And then Christina Moses was also in it, and she's now gone on to become really successful. She's on A Million Little Things, and she's been on a bunch of shows now. But in any case, Amy and I had such a great experience working together that when she got this opportunity to write and act in Group E's, the pilot for YouTube, she asked me to direct. And then same thing happened with Into Light. She had this project she was developing. She had a budget, and she asked me to come on. So Amy Walker's the thread between all those three projects. So we'll see. I mean, maybe I'll only make films with Amy. I don't know.
That's cool how it all worked out.
Yeah.
I'm always fascinated to see the different through lines.
Yeah.
Um, Kind of on the same tangent as that is how did Tangle come about?
Yeah. So the
Or the
ta-
Tangle, sorry.
yeah, the Tangle. Yeah. So we knew we wanted to make a feature because we were going to these festivals and we were taking our shorts around and they were doing well, and we were like, we really should just make a feature. Like that's the next step. And so Chris started working on a script, and it kind of just started getting a little bit bigger, and it started to get to the point where we'd need a bigger budget than what we thought we could possibly secure. And so we decided, like, let's make a feature for like a really ridiculously low amount of money. And it'll be like it'll Chris will create it specifically for a small budget. And so we just talked out this idea. We talked a bit, Chris came with kind of the overall, and then we just sort of like hashed out, some of the specifics like in bed over a few nights. And then he just sat down and wrote it. And what ended up happening is that our executive producer Clark was able to raise a little more money than we thought we could, and we were able to sort of extend some stuff a bit, add a bit to the story, and yeah, and then basically like it just all came together. It was really kind of wild the way that film came together, even just with like Joshua Baton, who is a dear friend of ours, but he's a busy working actor, but he came on, and then he brought Nicole De Silva, who has a giant following and who's a wonderful person and great actor. And then, you know, Josh also like brought on other people and other locations, and he was just a huge just he's just such an important part of this film. And the cool thing is that it's really all our films. Like it doesn't feel like, oh, this is my film or Chris's film or something like that. It's like we all really came together, and that's what it felt like. It felt like a family on set. It's like nobody was there to make money. You know, people were either not making money, therefore losing money, or they were making like a fraction of what they would normally make on set. And it was just a tiny crew and weird hours, and all sitting together eating family style for our meals, and it was very, very special. And yeah, like even like the set, it was like we had the location, but we had no idea where we were gonna like what we were gonna do with this big warehouse. Like we're like, what? And it was literally like a week before we were shooting. And Eric Thorne, our production designer, just swept in like a Prince Charming and like completely like created the set for the Tangle. It was amazing. And we really didn't know how it was all going to come together, but it just kept working that way. We just kept having these like little mini miracles or big miracles that made it work. And yeah, and I feel like it took us quite a while to recover though, because man, it was stressful. And producing, like Chris was acting, directing, he was the writer, and he was producing. I was just producing and acting, and that was hard. So I can't even imagine. Like I have a picture of him the final day of like principal photography. He's on our living room floor, just like face down, like surrounded by all this crap that we had brought back from set. And it's just like, yeah, that's independent filmmaking for you.
Right, yeah. Yeah, the short shoots and the long days and stuff, doing 4 jobs or for you 2 jobs at once has to just be, and you're putting everything out there, it's not like there's a giant studio just like, "Oh, you need more money? Here you go."
Right, exactly. Yeah, it was definitely, yeah. And you know what? Like I think my hope is that moving forward, the films that we make will have more money and more support. But I also really will fondly look back on this experience because um, there's nothing like a group of people who are coming together just because they feel passionate about something and they feel passionate about each other. It's really special.
Yeah, and I think that comes through on the screen.
Mm.
Um, Especially, I mean, the two of you have your characters have a close relationship, and then there's a wedge thrown in the middle, of course. Um, Actually, speaking of that, was that kind of an acting challenge? I mean, I know it's your profession, but then you also have a close personal relationship. So there's our like bleed over that made one aspect harder, maybe.
Yeah, so I mean, I also have a pretty close relationship with Josh, which in that instance was actually really nice because I felt so safe and comfortable with him, and I kind of created some backstory for their relationship that made it even more fun. Um, and Josh, like I said, was my acting coach, so I knew I could trust him to like be like, hey, like come here, like here, you might need to switch that up a little bit. So with Chris, um, so Chris is a great director, and he knows me really well, and so he didn't let me get away with a thing. I remember after the first rehearsal, I was like, I have to quit. I was like, I have to quit. I can't do this. I'm not good enough. Like, I had all this insecurity come up, and it's not his fault. It's just that he would point out any false note, and he was like, "No, that's not right. That's not right." I'm like, "Oh." So I went and I got like a couple sessions, like maybe like 4 sessions of coaching with another coach to just like feel like I was really supporting myself with it. Um, we've acted together now a lot of times because people like to cast us together. I guess we have
Hmm.
chemistry or something. And
Imagine that.
yeah, we're like a package deal. Um, and the acting together has never like it's always felt smooth and easy. I think being directed by him, I love it and I hate it because it's I don't know. It's like having your partner be like, no, that didn't work. There's something, it's like, oh, it's a little bit different than working with a director that's just your director.
Hmm.
Because there's little sensitivities, nothing that ever became any big problem, but just those little kind of little mini moments that you have to kind of navigate. But yeah, I love acting with Chris. He's a great actor. And I mean, one thing I will say is like being directed by him, it's like, he's going to get the best performance out of you possible. and there's like that feels good. That kind of trust in your director, that's really that's really meaningful. And he does. Like this is definitely some of my best work in the Tangle. And then Monkeys, the short that we did together that he directed, also some of my best work. And so yeah, it's a good thing for sure.
Okay, so in the long run, it's worth the extra mental
Yeah.
mental obstacle course you have to go through.
Exactly, yeah, for sure.
The movie has a very specific, I wanted to use the word cadence for the dialogue. Did you find that dialogue was harder than maybe another movie, or was it almost easier in a way because like memorizing a rhyme or a song is easier than a monologue?
Mhm. Yeah, it was definitely easier when it came to learning the lines, and the lines for this needed to be learned like you'd learn lines for a play because of the way we shot and because of how dialogue heavy it was. Like the first day we shot 17 pages and it's all dialogue.
Oh
And
wow, yeah,
so, yeah, so which 17 is like for people watching that don't know, like normally on like a big budget film, you shoot 2.5 scenes, 2.5 pages. In a like independent film, you shoot, 4 or 5, 6 maybe. We were shooting we shot 17, so it's like we needed to know those lines like inside out. Now, sometimes, of course, you always need to know your lines, but, you're shooting, a bit of this and a bit of that, and you're turning the camera around, and it's like there's usually a lot it's a lot like it's just a different kind of memorization. So, in that way, the style, the cadence, the lyrical quality of the language, it did make it easier to memorize. Now, the actual musicality and the way in which Chris heard it in his mind and wanted it to come out, that was more challenging. It's kind of like, it's kind of like doing Shakespeare, which I love. I find it to be a wonderful challenge. Um, but that was part of what made me after that first rehearsal be like, I can't do this. It was like I'm just not hitting the right but I caught up and I figured it out and I think it ended up coming across pretty well.
yeah. I guess from your side of things, the cadence would be harder to track because, like you said, you're not shooting the whole script sequentially beginning to end without stopping like a play. You're doing pickups and filling in and here and there and other angles.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, some of it really was almost shot like a play. I mean, like there were some continuous shots that we did that felt like being in a play. But yeah, it's different. It's not like you just get on stage and it's like go.
Right.
It's a little bit
Yeah.
different. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really interesting, and I think it added a lot to, well, it added a lot to the overall experience of the movie, but it also helped build the world where it's our world, but it's not our world.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't want to say too much for people listening who haven't seen it, but it's the not so distant future setting.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
I thought that was really cool.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it seems like we're kind of headed in that direction. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it's interesting. Yeah.
It's just like just skewed enough that it's not, not today. It's not your reality today.
Yeah, exactly.
So with this coming out in the time of COVID, elephant in the room, I guess. Are you missing out on the festival circuit? Is that something you really wish you could have done?
We did do it. We went to our last festival, I think in like January or February last year.
Oh, great. So you had a whole thing.
We had a full run, yeah. We won some nice awards and got a bunch of nominations, so it went really well. We it was a good run. And then we were supposed to have our Los Angeles premiere in May, I think it was, and so that got canceled. So I know that
Okay.
was disappointing because there were a lot of people who were excited about seeing it on the big screen, and it really, I mean, I guess every filmmaker says this, but it really is different on the big screen. Like there's
Hmm.
something so much more just rich and immersive about it. It's visually a really beautiful film, I think, and on the big screen you get a whole other dose of that. But yeah, no, timing wise ended up working out perfectly. We we finished the festival tour and then went into lockdown.
Yeah,
So
well, that's awesome. You got to do it because that's kind of a common theme for people I've been talking to the past, 6 months, even that they really wish they got to see it with an audience.
yeah. Yeah, it is a very cool experience. we had our world premiere at the London Sci-Fi Festival, and I was lucky enough to be able to be there because I had other overseas work, and I was able to kind of combine the trips.
Oh,
And
nice.
yeah, and it was really very cool. We had a, standing room only, and they just really loved it. They really got it, and that was really special. There was one person afterwards that said something about like, yeah, there's these films that they start, and you just kind of you lean back, and you're like, all right, and then he's like, and there's films and they start, and you go, you gotta lean in. He's like, this is a lean in. And I was like, oh, I love that. That's so true. And it is. Because if you lean back and don't pay attention, you're gonna get lost really quick with this
No,
thing.
yeah, that's a really good way to summarize the experience of watching the movie. Is that you have to pay attention, but not in a you're gonna miss something in a bad way. Like you pay attention, one, because you want to, and two, to get to the ending.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Totally.
Yeah, very cool. Because knowing there's a mystery going in, I try to watch out for the clues, of course, like anyone watching a mystery would. And it's always so nice when it comes together and when you look back, you see the pieces instead of it just being like, oh, I guess that's the explanation.
Totally. Oh, yeah, yeah. I'm glad that's your experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think Chris did a great job crafting that whole experience for folks. Yeah.
Well, I don't want to eat up your whole day. I really appreciate you coming on to talk about it. It was a really cool movie. Anyone listening to this should check it out. March 19th. Do you want to plug anything else? Maybe give your socials where people can find you, your other work?
Sure, yeah. So I'm on Instagram, and on Instagram, I'm listed as Jessica Clark Graham. And then I'm on Facebook and Twitter. My Twitter is deconstructing JG. What is it? Deconstruct JG. But if you Google me, my socials will pop up. Um, if you're interested in the other work I do around meditation and sexuality and spirituality, I have a website, yourwildawakening.com, and you can get more info on that in my book. I do have a really cool project coming out in April. It'll be on all streaming platforms. It's coming out in the form of an episodic. It's called The Hunter, and it's a project created by filmmaker Alexander P. Gutterman, and it's a really strange and beautiful exploration. And it's some of my favorite work. Between that and the Tangle, really some of my favorite work I've ever done. And then Chris is also in that. We don't act together, but we're both in it. Really beautiful, really strange, and it'll be coming out in like a 10-part episodic, and then also as a feature film down the line. But keep an eye out for that, The Hunter, in April. And then Into Light, the short that I mentioned about the suffragist, is available on Amazon Prime, and all the other shorts are available online for free. So yeah, check it out.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. We really appreciate it. That was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Adam.
Have a good day. I'd like to thank Jessica one more time for coming on the show to talk to me about The Tangle, available now on VOD. I highly recommend this movie. It's a very cool, smart science fiction slash mystery, and the two meeting like that is really cool. And I love how they took a future premise but then kind of grounded it in more like 50s or early 60s kind of styling, which all makes sense in the context of the movie. It wasn't just style for the sake of style. Anyway, thank you again, Jessica, for coming on. Check out The Tangle, available now on VOD. Please remember to subscribe to our channel. We have a lot more new movie coverage and a lot more interviews coming your way. You don't want to miss out. Make sure you listen to So Wizard Podcast every single week, wherever you get your podcasts. So Wizard Podcast can also be found on Patreon, where for as little as $1 a month, you get multiple monthly bonus shows for it. SoWizardPodcast.com is your resource for reviews, recommendations, merchandise, and more. We love hearing feedback, so drop us a note in the comments, leave us something on social media. All of our accounts can be found after the show and in the show notes. On a more personal note, a really good friend and I released a comic book in January of this year. We've been doing an issue a month. It's called Social Studies. You can find it at socialstudiescomic.com. It's a comedy comic looking at the high school experience through the twisted prism of the 90s cartoons we grew up on. You can see here some of the style of it. Very unique art style. It's funny, it's fast, it's bright, it's vibrant. Good stuff. I'd appreciate it if you took a minute to check it out. That's Social Studies, and it can be found at socialstudiescomic.com. Thanks.